Hello again, everybody, and here is our next lesson on the muscles of the body. And today we're going to be looking at the muscles of the vertebral area. So let's see what we've got. Okay, so we're starting with the more superficial muscle groups, and the erector spinae actually isn't one muscle, but it's a muscle group which consists of three different muscles and the fibers, all of which run vertically down the spine through the cervical and the thoracic and the lumbar regions. So these are basically the muscles that you can see running along either side of the spine. So they're called the paraspinal muscles, and they actually run in a group, that groove that is either side of the vertebral column, those spinous processes. So the first one is the iliocostalis. That's the first of the three erector spinae, and this is the most lateral of the three muscles. It starts it starts at the ribs and the iliac crest, and it inserts into the transverse processes of the cervical vertebrae and of the ribs as well. So you can see in that far left picture how it attaches to the lateral side of the cervical vertebrae, and in the middle picture how it attaches to the ribs. So we know it's a muscle of the vertebral column, and you can see by its location how it's going to extend the spine. And it's also worth looking down at the bottom of the muscle and seeing the white area, which is your thoracolumbar fascia, that a lot of these back muscles tend to blend in with. And we'll be talking about this with some of the other muscle groups. So this is iliocostalis, the most lateral of the erector spinae group. So the second one, the longissimus, is actually the intermediate muscle of the three, and this is the one that kind of forms the bulk of the muscle that we can see, the meat of it, if you like. So this, by the very name, longissimus, is the longest of them, and it starts right up in the transverse. So those are the bits that stick out to the side processes of your cervical, your thoracic, and your lumbar vertebrae. And then it inserts into the transverse processes of the superior vertebrae to the origin. So it goes from vertebra to vertebra. So lots of kind of small sections, if you like. So again, it's obviously a spinal muscle, and it extends the head and rotates it to the same side. And that's the cervical region, and it extends the spine. So all of these muscles are spinal extensors. The third one is spinalis, and this is the most medial of the three. And again, this connects the spinous processes of adjacent vertebrae. So again, we've got it in all the three different areas in the cervical, thoracic, and lumbar vertebrae, and it just goes from vertebral spine to vertebral spine, connecting the spinous processes. And again, that extends the spine. So those are the three muscles that make up erector spinae: iliocostalis, longissimus, and spinalis, going from lateral to medial. Now, our next muscle is quadratus lumborum, and this is actually one of the deepest back muscles that we have, and it's part of that core muscle group that you've probably heard talked about, either myself or somebody else talking about those deep core muscles that help to stabilize the spine. So quadratus lumborum is a flattened muscle. As you can see, it's sort of rectangular in shape, and in the human body, it's integral to that thoracolumbar fascia that we saw earlier on in the previous slides. That's that deep white area of connective tissue that we see in our thoracic and lumbar region. So quadratus lumborum starts connected to our iliac crest, as you can see, sort of like the superior part of there, and that iliolumbar fascia, similar to thoracolumbar fascia, but slightly lower down. And it travels up and connects inserts into the upper 4 lumbar vertebrae, so L1 to 4, and at the bottom of the 12th rib. And this is a muscle that acts as an antagonist to the abdominal muscles. So if you just contract one side of your quadratus lumborum, you're going to get lateral flexion. And that's concentric contraction. But if you get isometric contraction, where it's just contracting but not changing its length, for example, if you're carrying a heavy suitcase, then you'd be needing this isometric contraction to hold your back in place, and so it would prevent that side flexion. So the opposite side to the heavy suitcase would be isometrically contracting. Now, you can didn't mean to do that. Sorry, let's go back. You can also have bilateral eccentric contraction. So it's lengthening, and that's going to control sort of hyperflexion of the lumbar spine. So it can work in a number of different ways: concentrically, isometrically, and eccentrically. Gives you an idea of the different functions that it might have. So it's important to remember a deep core muscle that's a stabilizer. Now we can get on to our multifidus. So again, this is the deepest of our spinal muscles, and it runs down, as you can see from the image, the whole length of the back, right from the sacrum right up to the cervical region. So it attaches onto the transverse processes, the ones that stick out to the side of the vertebrae, and it kind of jumps a couple of between 2 to 4 vertebrae above that. So it goes up in sections of between 2 to 4 vertebrae. But it's, even though it runs the whole length of the spine, you can see how it's more developed down in the lumbar region. So this is a core stabilizing muscle, and it plays a really important role in static and dynamic spinal stability. And if you've got weakness in your multifidus, you can often get back pain. So it's really important to encourage people to work on the strength of their back core stabilizing muscles. So when both sides are working, so bilateral contraction will result in extension of the vertebral column. And if you've got one side working more than the other, it assists with rotation. Again, unilateral, it can assist with lateral flexion, and it's important in that stability, that local muscle controlling that fine movement within the vertebrae. Okay, so those are our spinal muscles we've looked at. The erector spinae group, we've looked at quadratus lumborum, and finally that very deep muscle, multifidus.